Today, my guest is Christian Nasulea. We are in Ukraine, in Lviv. I'm noticing that you're wearing a very nice Ukrainian vyshyvanka, so thank you for that.
There was a higher purpose that I could influence in some way. So, if you work with economics, if you teach economics, then you will very likely think that economics is the greatest thing in the world. I'm not sure it's the greatest thing in the world, but it's pretty great.
I actually believe that it's super important to combine studies in international relations and diplomacy together with understanding of the business principles.
Foreign interference, that was a problem. We have more problems. The problem right now is that the kinds of reforms that you have to enact after years of public spending without any kind of concern for the future or for the consequences will be hugely unpopular.
Do you think that that type of reckless spending and lack of accountability of the previous government, that's what led to the rise of the extremist movement?
But this is also something that I tell students or people who say that they are apolitical. They're not interested in politics. Well, too bad. Politics is interested in you.
Chris, thank you so much for coming here today to speak with me. We are in Ukraine, in Lviv, during a very interesting time of probably the time when it's super dangerous to be in Ukraine with very heavy attacks in Kyiv. So thank you so much, first of all, for your bravery of coming to Ukraine under these circumstances. And today, my guest is Christian Nasulea, who is the executive director at the Institute of Economic Studies, Europe, who is also a professor of economics in the University of Bucharest, who is also the associate lecturer of the Faculty of Business Administration in Foreign Languages of Bucharest University of Economic Studies, who has a PhD in Management and Economics, and who is sitting on the boards and is a CEO of many tech companies.
A few, not many.
A few. I was reading through your bio this morning. It's a very interesting bio. So can you tell me in your own words, what is it that you do for a living and how you manage to combine all these things together?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be in Lviv again. I love the city. I hope we'll be able to come visit without having to deal with the air raid alerts soon enough. So I have lots of jobs because I'm from Romania, and it used to be that in Romania you couldn't make enough money by just working one job. So the simple explanation is that at a certain point in time, I had to take on enough work so that I could live at a level that was comfortable to me. So this meant that I started an IT company when I was still in university, so I could fund my studies. Then at some point I started teaching part-time in the business school because I decided at some point for reasons that I have a hard time explaining myself to pursue a PhD. I was then in a position to be hired by another university so that I could become a full-time professor there. So this is essentially the short version of how I ended up teaching in university and why I'm still involved with these IT companies and IT projects. And now about my involvement with IES Europe. That came about because as I was traveling to different conferences, I re-met the president of IES, Professor Pierre Garello, who was my professor at the summer seminar I had attended many, many years before. And we together we came to the conclusion that I could help. So here we are. I'm helping out with IES now as its executive director. I'm teaching in a couple of universities in Romania, and I occasionally still help out my colleagues in the IT companies.
That's amazing. I can say that I'm a proud graduate of one of the summer seminars. So it was actually, I think two or three of them that I attended. So it was a very unique and interesting experience of actually getting to know people through the lens of economics. How did you develop your passion for economics?
So that's, I might give a very disappointing answer. I had no interest in all of this stuff, the economics, the public policy. I decided to study in a business school because I wanted to do business. This was my original plan. It was actually the first IES seminar that I attended that brought to my attention the fact that there are very interesting things to work on and to play with in economics. So this is basically how I got interested in the field. And this is definitely the major thing that pointed me in the direction of teaching in university, working on policy projects. And a lot of the things that I do today would have never happened without that first IES seminar that I attended. I believe it was in 2005.
Wow. So it's 20
20
years.
years,
Yes.
yeah.
But so what are the examples of some of these things that make you actually very excited about the subject?
Well, I was very fortunate to have a star team of professors at that IES seminar that I attended. So there was Tom Palmer, Don Boudreau, whom I don't know, maybe some of your viewers may know. Doug Rasmussen was the philosopher who was teaching us about philosophy. So it was, I did not realize at the time, but these are people who are highly influential and have been highly influential for thousands, if not tens of thousands of students all over the world. So you can imagine that the examples that I was put in front of by Tom or Don Boudreau or the others were highly complex, very challenging for a young and inquisitive mind, as I think I had at the time. So because we were given questions of how to solve things and how to improve society, I was intrigued. And I was hooked by the fact that I could do something about those things. So that beyond the world of business and the things that I was already working on, that there was a higher purpose, a bigger picture that I could have something to do with and that I could influence in some way if I applied my skills more in that direction.
Yeah. When I was studying in Ukraine, I was actually doing together two of the degrees in law and international economics. And I kind of couldn't find economics as fascinating as when I was listening to the lectures during the conferences where we kept meeting at Students for Liberty or IS or any other events. So I would be spending some of my lectures actually reading Why Liberty or other books that would explain me the concepts of how our society lives or could live in a much more interesting way, rather than I would be coming back to the studies and going through just the numbers and the typical calculus more rather than economic theory. Then I came to study to Italy, and again I enrolled in political science and economics, looking like maybe finally I can find that place where I can learn about political economy, about economic theory in a way that would inspire dialogue. And yet again, I was met with lots of calculus and very, very deep Keynesian maybe economics that was indeed very disappointing experience. But you have the opportunity to make economics interesting and exciting for your students. Do you find that as a rather unique experience in Romania?
So one thing that I have to mention, which I think is very important, is that I primarily teach economics to students of international relations. So this is, I'd say, a privileged position because I don't have to do the math. I can focus with my students on the stories, on the principles, on the philosophy of why some things work in a certain way. which is not something my colleagues who teach at the Academy of Economic Studies have. They have to focus on the formulas and the nitty gritty and the statistics and all of that stuff. And I think I've come to realize actually that this is one of the most counterproductive things which steer away lots of people from economics, which is actually a fascinating field if you don't get bogged down in the math and in replicating someone else's thinking with some numbers that you're given to produce some useless result, to output some useless result on a piece of paper. Economics is not about that. Economics is about understanding the relationships between people and the way things work in the world. And when you take that approach, I find that the majority of the students that I work with at the Faculty of History are pretty content with the work that we do together. And I'm probably being overly modest because I have over the 3-year bachelor's degree that I work with the students on, I have about 70 students who decide, in addition to the compulsory classes that they need to attend, to also be part of the economics club, which is strange.
Amazing.
In an international relations program, why do 70 students choose to come to the economics club instead of one of the other clubs, diplomacy or other clubs that would be closer to their intention to study? And I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that if you talk about bigger things, about how economic mechanisms and principles influence the bigger things in life, then people start to realize that it is fascinating and interesting and that it is something that's worth giving a bit of attention to.
Yes. I actually believe that it's super important to combine studies in international relations and diplomacy together with understanding of the business principles, how business works, and how the results of the diplomatic processes or, global events, how they impact business. Because at the end of the day, you cannot have either one or the other. They have to work together, and this is what our work is about, BNK. But a lot of times I'm understanding that perhaps people who work in the public institutions, they are, unless they had previous experience, they're quite detached from business life.
Again, this might just be me, as an economist, as they say in English, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So, if you work with economics, if you teach economics, then you will very likely think that economics is the greatest thing in the world. I'm not sure it's the greatest thing in the world, but it's pretty great. But I think that there are lots of fields that can benefit from the application of economics. I don't think every field has necessarily something to do with economics, but I think it's not just international relations. I think when we talk about law, there are so many things that can be brought into law about, for instance, how you calculate penalties, how fines should be designed so that they actually produce the desired effect. That's an economics thing. If you talk about, things related to politics, there's definitely always a need for some kind of economic calculation that you're going to do in order to figure out if what you're working on is worthwhile to begin with. And, because you mentioned people who work in the public sector, there's a whole branch of institutional economics that deals with the big things related to the public sector. And there are lots of economic models that can be super useful for people who work in lower roles, lesser roles in the public sector, but where you can still do your job better if you understand how people think and how things will develop.
And how for you, from the moment you started working with your IT company, before you got the education and now, how did it change your approach to working in tech?
Well, so first of all, when I was still a student, running my IT company already for 3 years, when I became interested in economics, I had a very programmatic approach to problems. So I thought that we can math the hell out of it until we solve any problem. And one thing that I realized after I started to get really interested in economics was that you can't, you just don't have the data because you're dealing with these pesky, annoying humans who make decisions that sometimes make no sense to you, although they might make perfect sense to them. So this is one thing that I think has had a very beneficial effect on myself, on my own personality, because I've started to be more understanding of other people, or more accepting of the fact that not everyone has to behave or think the way I behave and think, and that
Not all humans are rational. Humans are not rational human beings a lot of times.
or sometimes maybe they are, but we have no possibility to understand their rationality because we are not them. We do not have the full picture or the full story of what they base their decisions on. So the best way to look at this for me is to remain agnostic. I just don't know all of the variables, all of the data you're working with. So the issue of rationality or irrationality is irrelevant because, maybe it is a rational decision for a certain person, but there's no way for me to know that or to predict what the decision would be in the first place. So this is, I think this is one very interesting thing that I discovered very early on. And then, of course, once I started studying economics more in depth, then you start to realize when you go into incentive theory that there are a lot of things, a lot of amazing things that you can do differently to get better results for yourself or for your business if you understand the economics of it, if you understand what drives people to behave in a certain way and what are the statistical probabilities that you're going to end up with certain types of results in different situations.
So you apply the role of probability to your decisions.
Well, I mean, I'm here in Ukraine, aren't I? There's something to be said about the probability of there being an airstrike on one of the nights that you spend in Ukraine. And, when you run the numbers, by the way, it's a pretty easy decision to come and have a nice city break in Lviv because the odds are really in your favor. But, beyond that, it's, I'd say, even unavoidable for someone like me who has a background in mathematics, who has a background in programming, to not look at things from a math point of view as well. And it starts to be really beautiful when you start to understand that working with humans and doing probabilities is a very different thing from doing physics with probabilities. So I think it can be a fascinating journey for someone who has a technically inclined mind to try to understand other people better and to understand how things in general work a bit better so that you can get the best possible outcome for yourself.
Actually, so we were chatting yesterday a little bit right after Lviv, and actually I'm noticing that you're wearing a very nice Ukrainian vyshyvanka, so thank you for that. After that, you're heading to Aix-en-Provence for the IES seminar. And as I was reading the description, as one of the topics that you want to be discussing during the seminar is how the ideas of free market, how the ideas of free and open economy can help with building social good and common good for people. And I think that it's something that is a little bit comes as a misconception, that if you are only looking at the things from very free market perspective, the perspective of property rights, the perspective of business mindset, then social good gets sacrificed. And all the good, and the people won't have enough welfare, won't have enough state support, and those who are in the lower class won't be able to live and survive. So how do you approach this topic? Since we cannot be at the IS seminar, we would love to get a sneak peek into that.
So let me get one thing out the door, or make it perfectly clear from the beginning. Liberals, in the European sense of the word, classical liberals, if you want to call them that, are not bad people. They don't like to see other people suffer. It's not, people should not confuse a liberal point of view with some kind of stereotypical caricature of the monopoly man. This is not what this is about. What it is about is that we are all trying to find solutions to society's problems, and there are different approaches, different schools of thought that different people will favor at one point or another. Now, I'm going to make a joke here, and I hope it's allowed and appreciated. Do you know what they call a social democrat who's learned economics? A liberal.
Liberal.
So the only difference, between people with the best of intentions who want to do good things in the world, between them favoring some form of welfare, some form of redistributive system that is done by force, and someone who favors a system of social care or help for your fellow man that is more voluntary, is that once you understand economics, you start to understand that you can only go so far in doing things by force.
Yeah.
And that it's much better if you can create a system that is recognized by the people taking part in it as being good, to the point where they decide to voluntarily participate in it.
I think we can compare it, if we are talking about the examples of if something is imposed as a policy from the regulatory body, that's, we tend to sometimes be more resistant to it, rather than if the same thing would be introduced by some startups as innovation, as something that's bringing social good.
So it also works with NGOs. If it's done by charities, by non-profits in what we tend to call civil society in Europe, then it tends to work much better with better outcomes and more efficiency, and it tends to be more sustainable. Now, of course, there is something to be said about the fact that in Europe, at least in continental Europe, we don't have a tradition of giving, or not as much as they do in the United States or even in the United Kingdom. So we are used to the state forcing us to do certain things. But even then, I think it's very important to recognize that people accept to be forced only to a certain point, only when they perceive as, their sacrifice as being worthwhile given the use of the money that is being taken from them. So, even if we would, let's say, pretend that social democracy is the way forward and that this is the way everything should be organized, even social democracy only works so far as people who are forced to pay taxes think that their money isn't entirely being wasted, that there is some kind of acceptable benefit to society that is being created by them being taxed. So this is again something that I think is very important, and it's one of the key principles that has probably also shaped the way political discourse seems to be working in Europe as of late. Because I see much less of a difference between the kinds of things that the traditional social democrats are trying to do and the things that the traditional liberals are trying to do. Because there's this convergence that is, in my view, again, as an economist with a hammer, as something that has been caused or determined by better understanding of economics across the political spectrum.
I feel like lately, if we are talking about the political discourse, I feel like lately all of the, let's say, the party or the side which is proposing different policies, by reputation, attracts support to those policies, even if they make sense or don't make sense, or this attracts support. So if something is coming, let's say, from the left side in the support of the environment, probably the majority of the population would be very much eager to support that, rather than if the same concepts but in different language and in different formatting would be coming from the other side.
Well, I mean, I don't want to talk about other countries because I will get in trouble by saying bad things about other people. So I'll just say bad things about my own people. So in Romania right now, the difference, the two sides seem to be the pro-European common sense people and the people who are on the more nationalist side of the discourse, who don't really have any solutions to any problems. They just are unhappy about everything and would like to see the whole thing burn down so that something else could be built in its place. Now, to me, this is those guys. I don't understand why they take this position. You've had economic growth, you've had an improvement in living conditions and working conditions pretty constantly and consistently over the last 20 years at least. So why burn it all down? You've got a few problems with your house, you fix it up. You don't decide to demolish it and see if something else can take its place. But what I was talking about was that on the other side of the spectrum, everybody seems to be converging towards the center. Like you say, it's more a matter of labels, where if it's from the Green Party, then people who like the Green Party will like the policy more. If the same policy is from the Liberals, then only the people who like the Liberals will like the policy. But the good thing, and I really think that this is a good thing, is that there is convergence. When we talk about things that make sense, common sense solutions that can actually lead us to a better situation, there seems to be, in my view, in my country, far more agreement between traditional rivals on what needs to be done. And the discussions now seem to be more technical rather than things that are stuck on some kind of ideology or on things that would make interests diverge massively in the past.
It's so good and refreshing to hear that the common sense can bring people together.
Well, if you have a large portion of the population who will vote for extremists, then this tends to make everybody else band together, and you have traditional rivals coming together to figure out how to do things so that you can stop the rise of extremism and nationalism and other things that are certainly not beneficial to society as a whole, but which seem to be gathering more and more traction these days.
Yeah. So, now that we are talking more about Romania and basically the events in Romania of late, I don't know if we can discuss this, but since the deep economic crisis happened after the previous attempt at the elections, now you're trying to fix it all up and perhaps introduce some of the unpopular policies. Do you think that the population will actually understand and eventually, again, be united by common sense?
So the problem with the Romanian state is much deeper. Unfortunately, the foreign interference that led to the cancellation of the elections at the end of last year was a problem. We have more problems. So we have the problem that our politicians are trying to deal with right now is the cause, or was caused by the complete irresponsibility of previous governments when it comes to government spending. So Romania had a 9.3% budget deficit last year. It looks like it's going to be around 10 this year, which is completely unsustainable. Never mind that it's very, very far away from being under 3%, which is what we agreed to do with the European Union. And Romania has had excessive budget deficits since 2019. So we are financially in a situation which is truly severe. So this is the main thing that influences the way public discourse and reforms that are being enacted now are being constructed. Now, this being said, it's really difficult, and I am not entirely sure that the current government will survive for the 2-year term that the coalition has decided that the government would stay in power, although the term would normally be longer, but
they have to rotate.
Yeah, they decided that they will switch one liberal prime minister with a social democrat prime minister after a certain period of time.
That's very atypical.
But it's not for Romania. This is what we've been doing since the interwar period. So this is Romania in the 30s. This is basically the way government is done in our country. So this is it's also a sign of the fact that there isn't that much difference between the liberals and the social democrats to begin with. This is the reality. It's a fortunate reality from some points of view, but it's also unfortunate because it gives you less choice when it comes to options between sane political parties. I'm writing off the extremists as an insane choice because the kinds of things that they're talking about just don't make sense from an economics point of view, from a common sense point of view, and so on. But yes, the problem right now is that the kinds of reforms that you have to enact after years of public spending without any kind of concern for the future or for the consequences will be hugely unpopular to everyone. So I'm not entirely sure that this government will continue to be the government for the entire period that they agreed, or that we're not just going to turn back to other very extreme social or political movements in the near future, because it's absolutely normal for lots of people to be very unhappy when you have to put together such a big adjustment, when you have to both increase taxes and cut income for government employees. You probably have to limit the normal increase of pensions, which would help them keep up with inflation, which effectively means a decrease in the real income of pensioners. So it's a big mess, and I'm not exactly sure how things will play out, but I hope we will be able to avoid massive protests and social unrest, which would just make everything much worse than it already is.
Yeah. Do you think that that type of reckless spending and lack of accountability of the previous government, that's what led to the rise of the extremist movement?
Well, I think, first of all, that we should not discount Russian interference when we're talking about the rise of populism in Romania. In November, when we were surprised with the score of the candidate, whom everyone was talking about at that time, we were unaware of the amount of resources that have been invested into disrupting political life in Romania. So one of the things that I got asked about a lot, and which is probably something a lot of people are still curious about, was whether or not it was the right choice for the Constitutional Court to annul the elections. And my answer to that, even at the time, was that it was the right choice. I'm not exactly sure about the legal basis of how they do it. I'm not an expert in law, but it was something that I think it was good they did it, but I'm not sure they had all of the data that they should have had in order to make the call. Now, months later, it's also important to say that now we have the data. Now the information about the money that was being funneled to different people who were involved with this massive disinformation campaign, hybrid war campaign, essentially. The evidence is there. There are active legal cases with proper sound proof at their bases that are being instrumented against some of the people who are involved with that. So that's good. It's good to find out that sketchy call by the Constitutional Court turned out to be correct from the legal point of view, or from the data point of view at least, after we managed to get more information about that. But it's also true that there is a problem with the way political parties have gotten used to campaigning in Romania. So they were used to giving people stuff. Here is an increase for the pensions of the pensioners. Here is another holiday voucher for the public sector employees. Here is a kilo of flour and a bottle of vegetable oil.
Yeah.
Just before the elections.
Very, very traditional techniques. We used to experience them as well.
So this doesn't work anymore. This is something that we've been telling the politicians for 3 years before the elections. We've been telling them that, Romanians are not that poor anymore. Thankfully, the country has grown. The standard of living has increased. You can't buy a vote with a bottle of vegetable oil. People will much rather vote for someone who has shown that they are actually capable of making good decisions, that they have some idea of what it means to govern a country, and they will not vote for the person who behaves in the way politicians used to behave in the olden days.
So what do you feel like became the change in that, and what made the rise of the social participation in the public life? Was it the war in Ukraine, COVID, or just the change of generations?
So, by the way, there is no increase in social participation in political life. It's been essentially constant. We have the same percentages of people going to vote if you look at the different types of elections. So nothing has changed.
Okay.
It's just the way people decide who to vote for that has changed. So the same people who went to vote before, they are now starting to exhibit more complex reasoning. So, if a politician comes to give them, I'll keep going back to the example of the vegetable oil. If a politician comes to buy your vote in this very rudimentary, primitive way, now you're less likely to vote for that politician, because before people probably didn't understand it any better. Early 90s, you were fresh out of communism. Someone actually came and gave you something when you had so little. Sure, why not vote for that guy? At least he did something. Well, now people are starting to reason in more complex ways, and they are starting to realize, well, this is a form of vote buying, which is illegal. People are aware of that. This is something that should not happen. This is not a good person. So, let's vote for a better person. Whatever that means. Unfortunately for a lot of Romanians, that means just the guy who was never in power, who says a lot of very nice things, who talks a good talk, although it's highly unlikely that they will also be able to do any of the very good things that they talk about. So this is where we are, and this is kind of the problem that we also have right now.
Yes, but also, speaking of the social participation, now that during the election in November, the Gheorghescu party used TikTok, social media. Do you think that the best way to reach young people right now is through digital platforms, or there is still some of the traditional ways how to get in touch with the younger population?
So let's also clarify something, because I'm not sure everyone is aware of this. Over 40% of the Romanian population gets their news off of TikTok. So TikTok is the primary source of news, not for young people, for the general population.
Wow.
So this is a particularity of Romania. It was fueled by all sorts of very interesting phenomena that specialists in this field are still studying, because 2 years before, so 2022, it was over 25% of the population using TikTok as their main source of news. Fast forward to 2024, and it's up to 40%. So something is happening there, which is inexplicable. It has to do with COVID for sure. So a lot of people lost faith in mainstream media, because the mainstream media was funded by the government to back the stay-at-home campaign during COVID. So, people associated this with lying and disinformation. There's, again, a very complicated discussion there to discuss whether or not it was disinformation, or it was just a very good opportunity for other agencies or structures to exploit the moment and to push more people towards social media. So this is, by the way, TikTok, Facebook, they're both being used. Instagram is still somewhat of a bastion of the young and is less exploited for this kind of political campaign. Twitter does not exist in Romania virtually. People just don't use that. So it's essentially between Facebook, but especially TikTok, that people actually get exposed to all of this information, which does not pass through the usual vetting filters that would be there when we talk about mainstream media. Well, not that mainstream media is perfect, don't get me wrong, but
But then basically anybody can be the source of the credible news on TikTok. If you keep talking every single day with your face on TikTok, then people start trusting you because they see you every day, and you become the official news source regardless of what you're saying. That's how it works.
And several things have happened because of this. So you have a lot of narratives that are completely false. They start with completely false information, and they if the message is constructed in the right way, you can amplify completely false narratives on social media, on TikTok in particular, without there being any credible mechanisms that would allow you to stop that, or whoever you is, because that's also an interesting question. Who should police these kinds of things? Again, as I was saying before, not that this kind of disinformation didn't happen on mainstream media as well, occasionally, but it was occasional. Normally, there's accountability, there's a whole set of mechanisms which allow you to filter out information, or which even force the mainstream media to put a disclaimer when they present information which is not 100% verified. They can still present it, but they have to say, according to this organization, or according to this person, unverified by official sources. There's none of that on TikTok, and this means that, interestingly, we still have disinformation campaigns run by the same Russian bot networks that are active today. So the elections have passed. Either the Russians know something we don't about when the next elections will be, or to them it's a long-term commitment, and they're going to keep investing on destabilizing practices like this in the long run.
I think it's the second. The propaganda machine never sleeps in Russia.
Probably.
Yes. But then, just to shift it a little bit, about the future of Romania, which is the young people. It seems that many young people are leaving the country, going abroad, either to Western Europe, US, Asia, to look or Dubai, Middle East, to look for better opportunities, better income. Do you see that through working with your students?
So an interesting thing has been happening in Romania. So we had, I think 2023 or 2024, I'm not exactly sure which year, was the first year when we had more people coming back than we had going out. So it's definitely still true that a lot of young Romanians are still going abroad, looking for better opportunities, looking to study, to learn things, or to just make some money so that they can then invest it back home. It's difficult to say what will happen given the difficulties that the Romanian government is experiencing right now. But Romania is still a very good place to work and invest and do business.
And you are the example. You and your wife, you decided to stay in Romania, to work in Romania, even though you probably had multiple opportunities to work someplace else.
Exactly. So we actually looked at the opportunities that we had, and we realized that, for a very long time, especially until COVID, it was very, very clear that the best place and the best opportunities for us were in Romania. And, this was because of, tax reasons, but also because of the stability of the system compared to the amount of opportunities that you had within the country. It was by no means perfect. It was not perfectly stable, but there were way more opportunities than we would have elsewhere within the range of investment money that we had at our disposal. which meant that it made perfect sense to continue to work in Romania and to continue to do business in Romania. So this is something that even today, as we speak, this continues to be true. And this is why we continue to have a situation where, again, in spite of all of the problems that you may hear of when the media talks about Romania, those are problems of the Romanian government. The Romanian private sector is doing what it knows best, which is it keeps going regardless of what the politicians are doing, as it has done through other crises before or through other tough moments. So I'm very hopeful that things will continue to work well for the country of Romania, even if the current government doesn't manage to sort itself out and pull itself out of the hole that it's gotten itself into.
Where we are probably coming back to the theory of social change that we all got attracted to by getting into classical liberal ideas, is that the change comes from the bottom to the up, from people, from businesses, from students, from everybody who's doing one good thing at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah. But also something that we've been discussing with other people this morning is in Ukraine, the situation when the war started, a lot of Ukrainians left Ukraine. They went abroad, they started building their businesses abroad. So some of them did want to come back, but hopefully, once the war is over, there would still be a challenge to bring many people back to Ukraine. Do you think that there are some lessons that Ukraine can learn from Romania?
So I think the main lesson, to me at least, is that people should be allowed to do what they want. It's the most important patriotic mission that we all have is to do the best thing we can do for ourselves and our families. And, if that means you go and establish a business in Western Europe and then decide to come back to Ukraine at some point, that's absolutely fine. Western Europe will be better for it. Ukraine will be better for it when you come back. If you decide to not come back to Ukraine for whatever reason, that's also fine. You need to be sure that you do the best thing for yourself, because this will also send a message to the politicians back home. If people are not coming back, at some point they will have to start asking themselves, why? Where did we go wrong? So if we are overly patriotic and we do too many things for the sake of some, patriotic calling, higher calling that makes us sacrifice ourselves for our countries, the politicians will not learn. So this is something where we need to understand that there's got to be a balance when it comes to this as well. And I really think that this is what we're seeing in Romania now, because again, to explain things a bit, a lot of the people who are coming back are people who have worked in Western Europe for 20 years plus, even 30 years in some cases, who have earned their pensions in those countries and they're now ready to retire. So of course they're coming back because Western European pension will take you a bit further in Romania than it will in the country where you've worked. So this is also the case, but more importantly, there are lots of people who are coming back with money that they've earned in Eastern Europe, with skills that they've learned, with new capabilities that they've developed, and they're bringing all of those things back to Romania to do something in Romania. And I think this is great. I think this is really a great thing for the country, because you have people who have learned to do things differently and who will also bring about a certain change in the way society works. They've learned to be more disciplined. They've learned to understand rules in a different way. And the rules in Romania are not the same, but the fact that you are able to adapt to different types of rules will make you a better business person. It will make you better for society as a whole. As I was saying, just do the best thing for yourself, and in doing that, surely there will be benefits for the people who will work with you or for you, and for society as a whole.
But those who stayed in Romania, how do they interact? Those who are having a bit more of those conventional approach, conventional mindset. Do you see that clash between like westernized or internationalized people and the way how they do things, and the kind of stigma and the tradition that's probably been present among people?
So I think when it comes to people who have stayed in the country and who are returning to the country, especially for investment or for other reasons of that sort, there isn't that much difference. People have grown and developed whether they stayed in the country or whether they went away. I think a large part of the ills, of the problems that Romania is dealing with right now, stems from the fact that we have a large number of Romanian citizens who have left the country because they were destitute, they were poor, and they were, they did not have a lot of education, they did not have a lot of skills, so they just left the country out of desperation. And the truth that we're learning now is that things did not go very well for a lot of those people. They were not able to produce enough to sustain themselves in Romania. They went to other countries where they were able to get by, but their lives were not massively better. They were still the lowest paid and the people with the least opportunities in the foreign societies that they had to go to, which, at least at home, they were the lowest paid and the people with the least skills and opportunities, but at least it was in their own country, in their own language.
Yeah.
So they've had a terrible experience, and I understand the rage and the discontent that has fueled their adoption of all of these narratives that were fed to them by, foreign interests in particular. But this worked better for them because they were not in a good place. They were not in a good situation. So this is one thing where we're starting to see a very big difference between and a potential social clash between people who either stayed at home or went abroad but did something, they made something of their lives, and those who left out of desperation and found that there is no country where money grows on trees and the streets are paved with gold.
No magic pill.
No magic solution for their problems, basically.
Yeah. Well, before we kind of wrap it up, I want to come back to you as an entrepreneur, professor, and in some ways as an ambassador of classical liberal thought. What advice would you give to young people who are looking to grow their careers, to grow their work, to make something worthwhile of their lives?
So one of the main... I have a lot of criticism that I have no problem bestowing upon my students every chance I get, in a fatherly way, just because I would like them to do more. So one of the main things that I notice today in Romanian society is that a lot of students don't understand how important it is to just go and do things. Not spend their time doing, I'm not going to complain like an old man about children scrolling social media instead of doing something more worthwhile, although that is a problem. But the point is, go and do things. Employers or, people you will want to work with, they will not care about the degree you're going to get from the university I teach at. They will not care about the grade I gave you on the exam. They will care about what you are able to do. If you were able to learn to do something by interacting with me during our courses, that's great. But it's much more likely that you're going to be able to learn to do something practical that is useful, that is sellable on the job market if you actually go and do things. And by the way, go do random things. It doesn't always need to be something that follows some preordained grand plan. I don't know, go work at McDonald's for a bit. Go be a mountain rescue guy in the mountains for a year, if that's something that you're interested in. Just go and do things and develop some skills. and that's going to be the key to your success, whatever you or the universe decides you're going to do later in life. Now, the second thing which I mostly complain about to my business school students is that you need to have context. My students in the business school, like myself in the first few years, they think, oh, I need to learn about, 3 leadership strategies for success, a 5-step approach to logistics, blah, 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 all sorts of things that are very applicable and very catchy in business. And then they will go and do silly things like invest in countries to bring products from other countries, not knowing that there's some kind of historical problem between those countries, which is why those products did not already exist, where they wanted to spend their hard-earned money and try to make something happen. So context, this is the main thing. Context is very important. You need to take a bit of time to understand what goes on in the world around you. And this is, in international relations, this is very important, but this is also something that I tell students or people who say that they are apolitical. They're not interested in politics. Well, too bad. Politics is interested in you. So, the politicians, they will do something eventually that will either help you or hurt you. So, keep an eye on them at least. If you don't want to get involved, which I can understand, at least be sure to be informed, follow what's going on, because that's how you're supposed to do things to be successful in society.
Absolutely. And what I'm seeing, especially since we were talking about the Russian propaganda machine, they keep feeding information in every areas of life to people all over the world that sometimes you can't even recognize it. And especially people who don't have context, who did not take time to develop the critical thinking, study history, and probably read the news a bit more than what scrolling on TikTok gives to them. They are the easy targets, and this is very sad, because then they keep and share those stories above and beyond, and I'm so happy that you brought it up.
Well, there's also another note to make here about disinformation as a general issue, because there are so many sources of disinformation now. So even if you try to pay attention, you might still be the target of some kind of disinformation campaign. So another thing that I think you get by being interested in the context is that it will develop your critical thinking. You will have enough, hopefully, in the back of your head to be able to say, this doesn't sound right. When something is presented to you that seems to be logical and that is well constructed, but that is false, your only chance of being able to say, hey, I'd better double check this, is if you have some kind of context that will tell you this doesn't sound right. There's something fishy about this. This looks AI generated, and we should pay a little more attention to this.
Yes, absolutely. What are the best ways to fight disinformation for an everyday person?
It's a very difficult question, and I'm going to give the libertarian answer now, which is, when we talk about disinformation, it's not just foreign powers, foreign agents, or bad politicians we dislike who do disinformation. Sometimes it's our own government. For whatever reason, they will say things that fit some kind of strategy that the government has. The example I give, the simple example that I give for that, is that the Romanian government in 2020 told us that protective masks do not protect you from COVID, because they didn't have enough masks for the doctors. So they decided to issue an official statement saying that they didn't, in fact, help stop the virus. Then they came back a month later and said, yeah, we
got the supply.
now we have the masks, so that was a lie. We're sorry for lying. Sorry, it was bad of us to lie to you, but we really needed to protect the doctors because they're more valuable than you lot. So, you can imagine that didn't go well with public opinion. But the point is that when we're talking about disinformation and paying attention, you need to try and figure out with as many data sources as possible, with as solid an analysis as you are capable of, if something that is put in front of your eyes is real or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for sharing such an invaluable expertise, opinion, and I do believe, I never been to your class in Bucharest, but I do believe that you make economics and the study of economics very interesting and engaging. So very envious to your students.
Come by. You should come and see
Yeah.
what it's like.
Definitely, please. Thank you so much, and I hope you continue to enjoy Lviv to the best what Lviv has to offer.
Thank you for sure.
Thank you.